let's start. So first, homework assignment is out. As I said, it's due right before Thanksgiving. If anybody needs an extension, just let me know. And the instructions are on the site. Essentially, each one should write like their own solution to make sure you understand. It's okay if you talk among one another as long as it's fruitful. And please type it up in LaTeX and submit it through Gradescope. Questions? Yeah.
Is there a Gradescope code for this class? Like Gradescope, like I'm not involved in Gradescope automatically.
Oh, why can't you? Don't you use Gradescope for other classes?
Yeah, but I'm not seeing this class in my list.
Oh no, it is. It is now. When did you check?
Oh, maybe it's like a while ago.
Yeah, it's recently. Yeah. If there's issues, let me know. Okay. Yeah, this class is assigned to grade. There is a Gradescope site for this. Any other questions before we start? Okay, so just a quick recap. So last time we talked about the Kilian-Micali protocol. It's an interactive argument. It's a succinct interactive argument which you can use to prove membership in any NP language. Okay, and if you recall, the idea was we started before, that was kind of our entrance to cryptography. So we said the idea of the Kilian-Micali protocol is that you take any PCP, which is very, very large, but very efficiently, if you just have RAM access to it, you can verify it very efficiently. And the idea is you take this very, very large PCP and you kind of shrink it to kind of digest it down using cryptography to this kind of succinct digest. This is done using what's called hash function, but in particular Merkel hash or hash function that are succinct but can be opened locally. So I'll recall what this is in a second. And once the prover sends over kind of a squished form of the PCP, then the verifier now behaves like he's a PCP verifier. He tells the prover, open this PCP on the location that the PCP verifier would want to open, and he gets back the openings. So that's kind of what the Kilian-Micali protocol is. But in order to when I said, it squishes down and then there's opening, really what we need is, we want to take a hash function. So if you remember, a hash function is kind of consists of a key generation algorithm that generates a hash key and an eval algorithm that takes a hash key and an input and generates kind of a digest or a hash value. Last time we showed how to get a hash value, how to construct from the discrete log. We showed how to construct a hash function from 2 lambda. It takes 2 lambda bits. The lambda bits actually was z p to the 2 lambda to z p to lambda. But anyway, one can encode it to be 0, 1 to the 2 lambda to 0, 1 to the lambda. But this is actually not enough for the Kilian-Micali protocol. What we actually need is a collision-resistant hash function. First, it needs to be much bigger because we're taking a gigantic PCP. We want to squish it way more than like half. This takes, squishes the size, reduces the size from 2 lambda to lambda, so it squishes it by a factor of 2. We actually want to squish it to a much bigger factor. Okay, so we want to take kind of eval. What we use actually is an eval algorithm that takes strings of size 2 to the lambda. So note here the lambda is upstairs. It's very different than 2 lambda. It's exponential difference. So we take a hash function that takes gigantic strings to lambda. And moreover, another property that we want is we can open locally. Remember we said the way the Kilian-Micali protocol works is that the verifier asks, okay, you committed to the gigantic PCP, open it in location, 3, 7, and 15. Now, how do you open it? So we also want kind of a opening algorithm. So really what we needed when we talked about Merkel hash or hashes with local opening, in addition to having a key generation and eval algorithm, we also have an open algorithm that generates kind of a succinct opening, and which can be verified in a verification algorithm that verifies it. So last time we kind of constructed this Merkel hash. I'll recall it today quickly. And we ended without kind of proving that it's collision resistant. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to just wrap up the Kilian-Micali protocol by explaining the thing that was left is kind of to argue that this Merkel hash construction is indeed collision resistant. So that's where we're going to start today. But then, so once we do that, once we argue that we have this Merkel hash, we prove that it's collision resistant, then we're done with the Kilian-Micali. We actually proved that it's sound under this assumption. So okay, so where are we heading today after we finished the Merkel hash? Now we actually showed a succinct argument for all of NP. This is great, however, it's interactive. And interactive proofs or arguments are really, they're not very useful. And the reason they're not very useful is for many reasons. A, there's latency, we need to talk back, forth. But another reason, perhaps much more important, is that it's per verifier. So if I want to just prove to the world some statement, I can't prove it using, I'm not going to go to each person in the world and give them an interactive proof. So it's really verifier specific. Interactive proofs are verifier specific. It convinces the specific verifier you talk with. Okay, and we want a proof that convinces everyone. So that's kind of where the segue we're taking today. How do we construct actually non-interactive? One now to reduce interaction. Okay, so what we're going to show is how to eliminate interaction. And this is going to be done using a really beautiful paradigm called the Fiat-Shamir paradigm. So I'm going to explain what it is. It's very, very simple. And then we're going to introduce the random oracle model, which is a model that was invented in order to an attempt to analyze or to understand the security of this Fiat-Shamir paradigm. It's an ideal model. Okay, we're going to prove the soundness of the Kilian-Micali protocol that we saw last time. We're going to actually show that it's sound, even if you apply the Fiat-Shamir paradigm to it, as long as you rely on this random oracle model and this ideal model. And then we're going to only get till next time, but we're going to talk about the soundness of the Fiat-Shamir and the standard model. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about eliminating interaction using Fiat-Shamir, talk about the random oracle model, show that actually the random oracle model of this paradigm works well, often. We'll see exactly when it works well, when it doesn't. And then we're going to talk about, if we have time, maybe start talking about the security in that standard model, because the random oracle model is not it's an ideal model. So is it secure? Is it sound like when used in actual reality? That's the plan. Questions? Yes?
You shouldn't be able to do 2 to the lambda, right? Because your thing, or like if you're hashing something that long, you'll find a collision.
Oh, okay. So of course you can find a collision. Okay, so we define it. So okay, so the question was about this 2 to the lambda. We'll see the definition, the construction, and I'll explain. But we get completeness for 2 to the lambda. Now you're talking about soundness. Okay, soundness says that any Pauli adversary or T-time adversary, poly-lambda adversary or Pauli and T-lambda adversary cannot find a collision. Now, if this T is 2 to the lambda, then you're not going to be secure. So, the assumption will, this is for completeness. For soundness, the assumption is, for collision resistant, the definition is that no Pauli lambda time or Pauli T lambda, depending on if you want standard collision resistant or T collision resistant, which is a slightly stronger assumption, cannot find collisions. Great, thanks for the question. Any other questions? I like questions, just reminding you guys. Okay, yeah?
So during this whole thing, I'm trying to imagine like how big are the parameters. Mm-hmm. So n, like the size of the input, is something that's like normal people can read, right? Or yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the parameters. That's a great question. That's a good thing to start with. So we want succinctness, okay? Now, when we say succinct, really what we want is, so we get succinctness by using cryptography. Once we use cryptography, things grow with the security of that we want. So things will grow with lambda, which is the security parameter. what the security parameter is depends kind of how paranoid we are in the world, okay? You can think about it as 256 bits. Sometimes it's more, depending on also which crypto systems you use, but that's a good, it's kind of independent of the input, okay? It's just, you want as succinct as you can get, and if you want to use cryptography, it's like security parameter. Now, the input, it should, in some sense, it should not depend on the input. But of course, the input is not going to be like more than 2 to the lambda, because you think of lambda as such that 2 to the lambda is like more than the number of molecules in the universe. So nothing is that big in our world. Okay, so you think of the x can be bigger. Actually, the input can also be small, but then sometimes you don't need cryptography. It's so tiny, it's like cryptography is useless. You can just give the witness. So usually we think in our head of the input as can be much bigger than lambda. It can be polylambda and maybe even be like lambda to the log lambda. It can be, but it's not as big as 2 to the lambda. That doesn't exist. Okay, but it can be kind of anything that's kind of real world number in a sense. And so that's kind of what we should think of. Okay, does that?
Okay, so when we do statistics, we're trying to reduce the amount of, or the size of the proof from like still a reasonable polynomial size thing, but just to like a 256 size thing.
Exactly. Or right. So you can think of it. You're trying to when you do, and let me just repeat it also for the mic. When you're trying, when you do this interactive argument, you think of you take an x that's still real world. You can think of it polynomial lambda, but it can be more. But as long as it's a kind of real world thing, and you reduce it to kind of 256 bits. Okay, that's kind of the practical idea you should think of. And the more theoretical idea is to say you can take any input x, but not more than 2 to the lambda, because that's like, but anything less, and we make it as small as poly lambda. Okay, great. Any other questions? Yeah.
In the verified row is like the opening. Is that what it is?
Row, yes. Sorry, yes. This is I'll go to it now. This,
okay.
Yeah. Let me. Okay. So good. So let me just wrap up where we left last time, which is the Merkel hash. So we use Merkel hash in the Kilian-Micali protocol. Actually, we don't need to really remember the Kilian-Micali protocol for today. We're not going to actually really use it, but let me still finish the Merkel hash because it's a very important primitive. It's kind of used everywhere in cryptography, so it's very important to know. So what is the Merkel hash? It takes any hash function, not local opening, just a regular hash function that generates a hash key and has an eval algorithm, evaluates, just generates hash value, such that it takes 2 lambda bits to lambda bits. Okay, you can make it more general. It can be even 1 plus epsilon lambda bits to lambda. You can play with it, but let's say 2 lambda bits. And we construct from it a hash function with local opening. So let me tell you exactly what this hash function with local opening, what it looks like. So the hash key is exactly the same as before. We take the same hash key as our underlying. So first we started with a hash. We started with this hash family. What is it? Last time we saw, we can take, for example, I gave an example with the discrete log. But you can even, if you don't remember, it doesn't matter. Think of it, someone gave you a hash family with this domain and range. Okay, now I'm going to do a domain extension. I'm going to make the domain much bigger and get local opening. How do I do it? So this is the Merkel hash construction. The idea is, so the gen is, as I said, just generate the same hash key as the original gen. No change to the gen algorithm. The eval algorithm, on the other end, of course, changes because the domain is much bigger. Okay, it takes strings of size at most 2 to the lambda bits. And what does it do? So what it does is the following. It takes as input x. Let's suppose for simplicity that x is exactly kind of 2 to the L times lambda bits, okay? So it's, you don't have to assume this. This is just easy to assume, and you can always get it with padding. Kind of take any input and pad it so it will be of this form, and now hash it. Okay, I'll say a word if it's not of this form. But if it is of this form, what do? You take your input x, just partition it to blocks each of length lambda. So you have 2 to the L blocks. Okay, you have an input x of length 2 to the L times lambda. You partition it to chunks each of length lambda. So you have 2 to the L chunks. let's call the chunks x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on, up to x2 to the lambda. Each of them, up to x2 to the L, sorry. Each of them is length lambda. And now what you do, you take 2 blocks, this is 2 lambda bits, and hash it using our building block hash. That takes 2 lambda to lambda. You take the next 2 lambda, you hash. You take these 2, you hash. So, in other words, you take the 2 to the L blocks to 2 to the L minus 1 blocks. You hash every pair you hash, every pair you hash, every pair you hash, every pair you hash. You got 2 to the L minus 1 blocks. Then you take these blocks, and again, every pair you hash, every pair you hash, every pair you hash, 2 to the L minus 2 blocks. And so on and so forth until you arrive to 1 block at the end. What do you output? You output the top, the final, I guess it's going to be somewhere here, block, which is often called a root. You output the root, and you output the depth of the tree. Okay, that's the output of the hash. So the output is the root, the hash value here, it's lambda bits. And D, which you also think of it as being lambda bits, even if it's less, just encoded using lambda bits. So if you're mad now at me because I promised you lambda bits, and you see here 2 lambda bits, apply this hash one more time and you'll get your lambda bits. Okay, but outputting 2 lambda bits is also fine. Yeah?
Why are we bounding the input length to 2 to the lambda instead of just arbitrary?
Good, great. Because last time, great question. So last time when I mentioned, I said, oh, just take star here, anything. So why am I bounding now 2 to the lambda? So this construction bounds 2 to the lambda because, as you see, I take every lambda. I can't take. That's all it gives me. So that's all I get. Now you can say, wait, what if I want more? Maybe I want more than 2 to the lambda. You can actually get more than 2 to the lambda. For example, you can bootstrap this. So now you can take 2 to the lambda to lambda. You can kind of create a Merkel hash of this Merkel hash. You know, you can kind of, but actually, you never, it doesn't come up because you never need to. 2 to the lambda is like, nothing is more than 2 to the, we choose lambda so that in our world, nothing is more than size 2 to the lambda. But you can think of like, you can get, if you, just as a kind of mathematical curiosity, you can apply it, you know, so once you have from 2 to the lambda to lambda, you can chop your things to 2 to the lambda and do this kind of, use this as a building block to a bigger Merkel hash. So you can kind of amplify it, you know, but we're not, for us, 2 to the lambda is good enough. Great question. Any other question? Yes?
Like, why does the depth need to be included in the output? Like, should it not just be a function of the length of x?
Good. Great question. Why do I insist on including d? Is it not a function of x? It is a function of x. It's a deterministic function of the length, not even of x, of the length of x. Yes. However, nobody knows what x is. So, you know, at the end of the day, I want collision resistance. And so the property we want from this hash is that it's collision resistance. What does collision resistant means? It means that you cannot output a hash value with 2 different openings. Now, when you output a hash value, nobody knows what the x is. Actually, you may not even know, well, if you, okay, when you open, you know, but, you know, when you give someone a hash value, there's no x inherently part of it. If you don't include the depth, actually there's an attack. It's not collision resistance. It's really not. It's not just a, why is it not collision resistance? For example, just as an attack, let's say I publish this root, even, this is my root, okay? This is my input. My input is x1, x2, x3, x4. And the output is root. Now let me break the collision resistance. I'll give you 2 different openings. One is x1, x2, x3, x4. You do the hash, you see, yeah, you're happy. It's a good opening. Now let me give you another opening. Just this and this. That's also a good opening. So I open it in 2 different ways. That's not okay. That's a collision. If you include D, however, then so that's exactly what will allow me to argue collision resistance. It's this D. Great question. Thank you. So this is the construction. Questions? Okay, let's see, how do we open? So now, this is just, so far, great. We managed to go from 2 to the lambda to lambda. I didn't argue collision resistance yet, but at least we did domain extension. So we extended the domain. But I also want, especially I need it for the Kilian-Micali protocol and for many, many other uses in cryptography, I want to be able to do local opening. So remember, what does local opening mean? I may not want to open I may not want to give you my entire input. I may just want to give you, to convince you that this hash value in some location I of the input, the value is some bit B. But I don't want to give you the entire, because the entire input is gigantic, you can't even hold it. So I want kind of a succinct opening. I want to convince you in a kind of a very succinct way that what's sitting here in this bit is 0 or is 1. So how do I do it? So this construction is actually really nice. It gives you a local opening in a very nice way. So what's the local opening? Suppose I want to open this kind of the bit here, sitting here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to actually give you this entire block. It's only lambda bit, so it's not that big. Okay, I give you this block. What do you do with it? So let me help you convince you that this block is indeed the block related to the root. Namely, it's the block that indeed sits here next to. How do I convince you? I give you the sibling. So this block has a parent. I give you the sibling and the parent. This parent has a parent. I give you the sibling and the parent, and so on and so forth until you get to the root. I give you all these blocks. So in each layer, I open 2 blocks, which are the 2 siblings. So I open 2 siblings, you get this. I open the 2 siblings, you get this. I open the 2 siblings, and so on. Yes?
This is only a constant factor group, and so I don't know if it matters, but do you strictly need to return the ancestors? You can only return the siblings, right?
Good. Right. You're totally right. You're saying, well, if you really want to be, what you're saying, which is completely right thing, this is wasteful. Because actually all I need to give you is the sibling. So why waste communication? If I want to open this, I'll give you this and this sibling. I don't need to give you this. You can compute this on your own. So compute this on your own, I'll give you this. I don't need to give you this. You have these 2, so compute this on your own. And then I'll only give you this. And so on. You're 100% correct. I actually just need to give you 1. Okay, I wrote 2 because it's just easier to say so. But yes, exactly. 1 is enough, and you can compute fantastic. So that's I denote it by, so what does the open do? It gives you for each layer, it gives you 2 blocks. For layer J, denoted by ZJ. So ZJ is 2 blocks. Okay, there's on the leaves, it's 2 blocks. J equals 0, it's on the leaf. Layer 1, layer 2, up to layer D, it's actually just the root. So you can actually go to D minus 1 if you want. Okay, but I'll just, in my mind, I want to include the root. It's just, the reason I include both in the root is now when I analyze it, it's notation-wise, it's just very, very easy. But really, it's enough, like you said, to have the sibling, and the roots, of course, you don't need to give. Okay, but let's just think this is how I open. And now, how do I verify? I just take each 2 sibling, compute the hash, and make sure it corresponds to the relevant Z is indeed the parent. So again, you gave me all these things. I compute these 2. I check that it's consistent with what you gave you. Or if you didn't give me, fine. I'll compute on my own. I get this. I'll compute this. And give it. And then I'll check that. All I need to check it then is consistency with the root. Okay? That's the verification. Question about the design, the algorithms. Okay, so this is kind of where we left off actually last time, and what I want to do now is do the collision resistance. I'm happy that actually we got a chance to do it again because it's a very important primitive, so it's worth kind of having it ingrained in your mind. Okay, so why is it collision resistant? So to prove collision resistance, what do we want to argue? That an adversary that's given a hash key cannot produce a hash value, namely root and D, with 2 different openings. Okay? So suppose there exists a Pauli size adversary that does find a collision. Okay, such that the probability that A, he gets a hash key. Hash key is from Jen. And somehow he manages to output a hash value, which is root in D. That's just a hash value. And he gives me some index I, and he managed to open it in two different ways. He gives me an opening that says, oh, I is 0, and he gives me another opening that says the ith bit is 1. And such that for both of them, such that for every b, for both 0 and 1, var will accept. Var and hash key, root and d, I and row b outputs 1. So suppose I have an algorithm that gives me a hash value, an index, and a valid opening both to 0 and to 1. Valid, I mean that the var will accept both of them. Oh, sorry, b. So var takes hash key of value, an index I, and a bit b, saying whether index I is 0 or 1, and a proof, an opening. And suppose he accepts both. Suppose he accepts both with probability at least, I know, epsilon. Okay, so suppose there exists epsilon. So suppose there exists epsilon, so that for any lambda, the probability that A managed to find the collision like this is at least epsilon. I'm going to argue that then you can find a collision in the underlying h, in the small h, with probability epsilon. Okay, so if you have an algorithm like this, then there exists an algorithm, poly-size, such that the probability that B, he gets hash key, the probability that he outputs, I don't know, x0, x, and x prime, such that the original eval hk x equals eval hk x prime, and x is different than x prime, is at least epsilon. But we assume that this is collision resistance. We started with an underlying hash function that's collision resistant. So the epsilon has to be negligible. Okay, that's what we're going to show. So we're going to use if an adversary can find a local opening that collides for the Merkel hash, we can use them to actually break to find collision in the underlying kind of 2 lambda to lambda hash function, in the little hash function. So how does B work? What does B do? B takes a hash key. He just runs A. So we claim that there exists a B, so let's see. B, an input hash key. What does he do? Just run A. So get root D, I, row 0, row 1, which is just A and hash key. Now, he got row 0 and row 1. What are row 0 and row 1? Each row is this kind of 2 pairs of siblings. I'm going to assume that both exist because it's just easier for me. That's why I wrote both of them. So each opening, so row 0 is for each level, you have Z0J from 0 to D. And row 1 is, let's call it Z1J. Now, what do we know? In the leaves, so we know that Z0, 0 is different than Z10. The 2 leaves are different because in one leaf, okay, suppose verifier accepts both of them. In the case that these are both accepted, I'm going to argue that I found collisions. Okay, so now suppose row 0 and row 1 are accepted. So var accepts both of them. Now, if var accepts both of them, so we know that the leaves are different because in the leaves, in one case, I have here a 1, in the other case, I have here a 0. So they have to be different. So I know the leaves are different. I also know that Z0D equals Z1D. These are both a root. Now, of course, I said we don't need to include it, but I'm just putting here, because the reason I want to include it is just for clarity to say, look, we have kind of D layers of information on each opening. The leaves, they must be different, because one opens to 0, one opens to 1. The root, the last one must be the same, it's the root. It means that there must be some kind of two adjacent layers on which below they disagree and above they agree. Okay, we know here they disagree, here they agree. Okay, they disagree. Do they disagree here, disagree here? At some point they're going to agree. So we say there must be a layer J such that Zj0 is different than Zj1, but Zj plus 1, 0 is equal to Zj plus 1, 1. Yeah? Okay, they disagree here. How about one layer above? Do they agree? If they agree, great, then that's going to be our J plus 1. They disagree? Let's go up. Until at some point they'll agree, because on D they agree. Yeah?
Oh, just for the video, should it be like 0J notationally and 0J plus 1?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Great, thank you. Yeah, it's not just for the video, it's also for you guys, so I won't confuse you more than it. Thank you. 1J, 1J plus 1. Thank you. Okay, yes, is it?
Is that other way around? Because J plus 1 is, oh, you missed it plus 1. You just missed it plus 1.
On the bottom left.
Yes.
It is 0.
Oh my God. Okay. No, the 0, 1. Okay. Did I get it right? Yes. Okay. So there's a layer J so that in layer J they disagree, in layer J plus 1 they agree. That's it. This is a collision. Why? What is layer J plus 1? One of them is the father, is the parent. So we have two that they disagree, but both of these they agree on. In particular, they agree on this. So done. So we found a collision. This must mean that the hash eval hash key of Z0J is equal to eval hash key of Z1J, because this value is one of the, it's, you know, one of this and one of this and one of this, depending if it's the left or the right, depending on the tree, but and they're both equal. So done. I found a collision. Okay, with the same exact probability. So it's now, as I said, this I wrote here. Suppose there exists poly lambda. I could have, if we assumed that the underlying hash function is T-secure, namely you can't find collisions even if you run time poly T of lambda, then we get that the Merkel hash is poly T secure, because B, all it does really is just run A. It doesn't run much more than A. It just runs A and then it does something very trivial. So the complexity of breaking the Merkel hash is really the same as the complexity of breaking the underlying hash. So if the underlying hash is T-secure, Merkel hash is T-secure. Questions? Okay, so where are we? So we proved the Merkel hash. As we saw, the Merkel hash was used to give a succinct interactive argument for all of NP. So now, if you're willing to, you're happy with interactive protocols, Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the semester and we're done. If you're not, though, but as I said, we're not happy with interactive protocols. It's really interesting, actually, to think of the evolution of this, because, before all this interactive proofs and arguments and so on, we had just mathematical proofs, which were not interactive, but they were very, very long. And people were not happy, it's like, oh, they're so long. And then interactive proofs were defined. Actually, they were defined only for the sake of zero knowledge. They were defined just to get zero knowledge proofs. I'm going to actually mention that we're going to talk about zero knowledge later today. And this motivated kind of to introduce interaction. And then people are like, wow, what a great, forget about zero knowledge, forget about cryptography. This is such a great model. Using interaction, we can prove a lot more. Right? We saw the GCAR protocol. You can do you can prove actually any circuits that are really, really huge as long as they're kind of have depth. You can do p-space. Or any computation that has poly depth. You verify can be any depth d, the verify runs in time d. Great. It doesn't run in the sign, so it's much, much more powerful. Wow, wow, wow. And then people are like, actually, with cryptography, you can do much more. Great. But now, but wait, there was a big price. We actually don't want interaction. So where are we? Are we back at NP? NP is we're back in the mathematical proofs that are way, way too long. So I said, no. We're actually going to circle back in a very interesting way and get succinct non-interactive proofs. So how do we circle back? Okay. So this idea of how to circle back actually was put forth by Fiat and Shamir. This is in the mid-'80s, in '86. They proposed a really, really nice paradigm. Actually, they didn't think about, this is '86, this is kind of before interactive proofs. It was just when zero knowledge was introduced. Interactive proofs just came about, but now, there was no PCP, no interactive argument, none of that. Okay, this is in '86, Fiat and Shamir. They proposed a method of actually reducing interaction, of constructing signature schemes. Now, I stand behind what I said, that this class will not require a lot of crypto background. You don't need to know what signature schemes are. But what they did, their idea is, there's a primitive called identification scheme. I want to prove to you that I'm Yael. Okay, how do I prove that I'm Yael? I have a public key corresponding to my name, and I'm going to prove to you that I know the secret key. Whoever knows the secret key has my identity, essentially. That's how things work in the digital world. So I'm going to prove to you that I know the secret key. This proves that I'm me. Okay, this proof was interactive. Okay, identification protocols are like 3-round protocols. I give you a message alpha, you send me a question beta, I give you an answer gamma. You verify. That's how it works. Now, they said, let's convert this identification scheme into a signature scheme. Instead of kind of interacting to make sure it's you, every time you want to send a message, kind of use this message, take this identification protocol together with some message and kind of eliminate the interaction. I'll explain exactly how they do it, but they do it in a way to construct signature scheme. That was their goal. But now, several years after, we use it all the time to actually forget about just the specific application of identification scheme to signature. That's one application. But actually, we can use it to eliminate interaction, not only from identification scheme, but from any interactive protocol that is public coin. So let me explain. So now, take any protocol. So this is a paradigm for eliminating interaction from interactive protocols that are public coin. So not all protocol, but ones that are public coin. So what is a public coin protocol? Take any protocol, like say a proof. So I have a prover and a verifier. And suppose for a second suppose for simplicity that it's 3 messages. Okay, so the prover sends a message alpha, the verifier sends beta, which is random. Okay, that's public coin, meaning the message of the verifier is completely random. Okay, let's say it's kind of lambda bits. If it's less, then just pad it to be lambda. Okay, and if it's more, just call that lambda, make that the security parameter. Just increase the security parameter. Okay, now you send gamma. And maybe it's more around, so maybe then he sends delta, let's say random bits, and then you say epsilon, and you can continue. Okay, let me stop here for the sake of, okay. Now I'm going to eliminate interaction. How do we eliminate interaction? It seems like interaction is very important. I mean, the entire kind of, if you remember the sum check and GCAR, I mean, it's tempting maybe to say, oh, tell the prover, compute alpha, beta, gamma, just compute the transcript on your own. You simulate the verifier's messages. Then I'll cheat. So how do you get rid of the interaction? It seems really, really hard. Actually, it's so easy. I mean, their idea is trivial. So what is their idea? They say the following. How does the prover get this beta? The verifier chose it. So you know what? Let's not have the now we don't have a verifier. It's not interactive. There's no verifier. So how do we compute this beta? Let's compute it as kind of a hash function applied to the transcript so far. So let me explain. So here's how you convert it to P Fiat-Shamir, V Fiat-Shamir. This is associated with some hash family. Okay, it's associated with a hash family. So the Fiat-Shamir paradigm, you can take any hash family and use that to reduce interaction. How do you use it to reduce interaction? Now, there's some hash key that's chosen once and for all. Everybody knows it. Either the verifier sends it once, or if you think about like everybody can verify, I don't know, the US government publishes this hash key, everybody uses this hash key. Okay, there's some fixed hash key, everybody uses it. Now, once we agree on a hash key, what does the prover do? He computes alpha. Let's say he wants to prove that X is in some language. So let's say he's telling, okay, I'm going to prove to you that X is in the language. Let me prove it to you. Okay, I compute the alpha. Now I'm waiting for a beta, but there's no verifier. Fine. I'll tell you what the beta is. Beta is going to be eval of hash key on the transcript so far. X and alpha. That's currently what's in the transcript. The statement and the first message alpha. Now the prover's like, okay, this is the beta I got from the verifier. He's interpreting this as the beta he got from the verifier. And now he computes gamma, my answer. The prover's answer. Now he's waiting for a query from the verifier, some delta. But there is no verifier, so he's going to compute the delta as eval of the hash key using the transcript so far. So X, alpha, beta, gamma. Once he has delta, he's going to go back to being a prover and compute epsilon. And you can continue. Next message, he computes a hash value of all the transcripts so far, compute the next prover's message. Another and we go, that's how we continue. Any questions about, so what did we go? We started from an interactive protocol, can have many rounds, and now all we need is to agree on a hash key. And once we agree on a hash key, the prover just gives you, this is one message, that's it. Yeah.
Is it important to include beta in the transcript when you're hashing?
Good. Great question. Is it important to include beta? Actually, you don't need to include beta at all because the verifier can compute beta. So you only need to know beta so you can compute gamma. You actually don't need to include it. Great question. Great question. So note, for example, if you think about Kilian-Micali protocol, you may not remember it, but let me just write it here just to refresh your memory. Why not? You don't need to actually to understand this, but since it's such a nice protocol, and so how does it go? There's a prover and a verifier. The verifier sends a hash key. So he wants to prove that X is an L. He does a Merkel hash of the PCP. So he computes a PCP. Pi is a PCP for X and L. And he sends you the Merkel hash. So he sends you root and the depth. That's just the. So he takes the PCP and he does a hash with local opening. For example, Merkel hash actually can do any hash with local opening that you want. This is the most common one. And then he gets kind of the randomness from the PCP verifier. So this is R from R corresponds to the PCP verifier. This determines a few locations to open. So now he opens. So he gives. So this randomness corresponds to like some locations I1 up to IL. And then you just open pi I1 with open 1 up to pi IL with open L. That's the protocol. Note, this is completely random. It's the randomness of the PCP verifier. So we can eliminate interaction. If you think of it, this is just kind of a protocol where you send a hash key, and then you have kind of alpha, beta, gamma. Okay, so let's eliminate interaction. So how do we eliminate interaction? Well, there's this hash key. We can use this hash key to do Fiat-Shamir, but we can also use another hash key sub Fiat-Shamir. And now, this can be, now you give alpha. Beta is going to be simply, you don't have to include it, but it's going to be, in our head, it's going to be eval of hash key Fiat-Shamir of X and alpha, and maybe hash key is also part of the transcript, and this gives beta, and now you compute the gamma, which is the opening. Okay, so you can take any. So now, what does the Fiat-Shamir give you? It gives us a way. Remember, Kilian-Micali was very succinct. Right? You can take X, let's say, NP language. N can be very large. It can be lambda to the 1,000. I don't know. It can be even super polynomial lambda. It can be almost as large as 2 to the lambda. Okay? And look how succinct the protocol is. You just send a hash key, the root, which is lambda bits, and the opening to the PCP is all lambda bits, poly lambda bits. So very, very succinct. And now you can even just make it. What is this? You can all send it all in one round. So what does it give you? What does it tell us? That we can take any NP statement and give a proof of size polylambda. Doesn't matter what size the X is. That's amazing. Without cryptography, we need poly-N, these gigantic witnesses. Yeah?
So I guess for the collision-resistant security property of probability significant over hash keys, you could imagine some kind of weird hash family where there exist hash keys that are really bad.
Okay.
And so I guess here it's fine because the verifier chooses the hash key, but you might imagine if the US government publishes a hash key or anything else, what if it happens to be a bad one or was chosen to be a bad one?
Okay, two things. First, you're saying, who chooses this hash key of the Fiat-Shamir? How do we know that we trust it? But it's much worse than that. Is it secure? Let's say it's chosen randomly from the hash family. Is this sound? So again, what did we do here? We started with an interactive protocol. We proved it's sound. Let's say Kilian-Micali is sound. We proved it. Assuming we have collision-resistant hash, we proved that it's sound. It's sound assuming the prover gets the messages of the verifier randomly. That's when it sounds. We used it to prove soundness. Now, what am I saying? What are we doing now? I'm saying, for forget about it. It's not random. Actually, you computed on your own from some hash key that someone chose, even honestly, from, let's say we all agreed on some hash family, and someone honestly chose a hash key, but now you know this hash key, now you compute. Who says it's sound? I mean, is it still sound? Maybe it's not sound.
Maybe the hash key always outputs 0 at the start.
Okay, so first of all, of course, one can think of this hash functions need to have some property. Okay, collision resistance, like at the minimum. If you can find collisions, for example, here you're screwed. It can be trivial. Okay, so you need some property. Now the question is, what property do you need? What property do you need from this hash family to argue soundness? Yeah.
I'm not sure if you like pseudo randomness or like true randomness, but like the outputs like so random.
Very, very okay, good. So it seems like, well, what do you need? It needs to be random, like in the protocol. Like, okay, we want to say take any. What is our goal? Our goal is to say take any protocol that is sound, public coin, and we want to convert it to non-interactive. That's what we're trying to do. Now I'm saying, what property do you need? Well, look, here, our guarantee was that it's sound if this is random. So we need this hash to be somehow random. Stands to reason. So this is, no, okay, but look, hash functions are not random. It's a hash function. By the way, let me say, this paradigm is used all over the place. It's a very popular paradigm. It's used a lot in signature schemes and also in proof systems. It's used all over the place. And which hash function is used? Some off-the-shelf hash function, SHA-256, like these engineered type, hash functions that are optimized. So is it secure with SHA-256? It's definitely not random. So we actually don't know. So let me be honest. Is it secure? I don't know. Yeah.
I think for the specific case of SHA-256 is only shown now by lens extension tab. It is definitely not right. Can distinguish it from something.
Yeah, right. Right. So actually, let me just say a few things. Okay, maybe I'll cut to the chase. I do know, let me tell you, it's not necessarily secure. Actually, unfortunately, we have counterexamples. So I said this is used in practice all the time. It's one of the great inventions of cryptography. Is it secure? No. Okay, so what do I mean by no? Okay, is it always secure? No. So yeah, let me take back my no and say, is it always secure? Is it always the case that when you start with an interactive protocol and convert a public coin and you apply Fiat-Shamir, is it always secure? No. Moreover, let me tell you, we have protocols so that no matter which hash family you use, for all hash families, the protocol becomes insecure. Okay, let me tell you even more than that. That will kind of really, you'll be mad. The Kilian-Micali protocol that we kind of built up, even that's not secure. The Fiat-Shamir won't be secure on it. But let me actually put an asterisk there. So let me tell you what's known about the insecurity of the Fiat-Shamir paradigm for this protocol. What is known is there are some contrived. So the Kilian-Micali protocol says, take any hash function that's collision resistance, and take any PCP, we get soundness. There are examples of specific hash functions or specific PCPs that are sound, of course, because there are examples of collision-resistant hash functions and PCPs, such that this, of course, is sound. It's sound for any collision-resistant hash function PCP, but such that no matter which hash function you use for the Fiat-Shamir, this will be insecure, not sound. No matter what you use. Yeah?
More detail what breaks?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit what breaks in a second. Yeah?
Is this a conjoined example or it's natural?
Okay, good. Same question. So the example for why it breaks, the example for why it breaks is very contrived, actually. So that's why is the message here, don't use Fiat-Shamir. We have a break. No, that's not the message. You should use Fiat-Shamir because in practice it works very well. I don't know of a single instance that people use Fiat-Shamir in practice and it broke. So it's a great paradigm. Use it. Can we come up with a general proof of security? No, because we have counterexamples. Okay, so what did we learn? Okay, so maybe I'll start by saying, I'll say very, very high level, not in detail, but about the counterexamples. Okay, how can we build counterexamples? And as opposed to going to the Kilian-Micali protocol, because there you need to work a little harder to fit it in. I'll say a word of how you fit it in there too. But the idea is the following. Let me try to give you a proof that is, or an interactive protocol that is sound, but when you convert it to, when you apply Fiat-Shamir, soundness breaks. So the idea is the following. It's going to be a very contrived protocol, okay? So what I want to do is construct a contrived protocol that is sound, but when you apply Fiat-Shamir, no matter which hash function you use, it will break. And intuitively, the contrived protocol is the following. Take any sound protocol. For example, Fiat-Shamir, for example, Kilian-Micali. Whatever, or GKR, whatever sound protocol you like. And I'm going to change it, I'm going to tweak a little bit. That the soundness will still remain. I'm going to tweak it so that the soundness will still hold, but on the tweaked protocol, when you apply Fiat-Shamir, it will fail. Okay, so start with PV, for example, GKR, for example, Kilian-Micali, whatever you like. And I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit. How am I going to tweak it? I'm going to say, tell the verifier, you know what? Accept if you accepted before, but accept also if something very weird happens, but don't worry, it will never happen. Okay, when else are we going to accept? So remember the verifier, let's say he sends kind of a random beta. If the prover, let's say ahead of time, guessed your beta, he told you, I know how you're going to compute your beta. So if the prover ahead of time sent you kind of, sent you a message that will kind of say, kind of, I can predict beta, and kind of will predict beta ahead of time, then you accept him. Because you're like, this is random. What's the property that you can predict my beta? If beta is like random in 0, 1 to the lambda, there's no way you can predict it. So if by any chance you predict, I'm going to, you won the lottery. I'll accept you no matter, I don't care if X is in the language or not. It only adds like a negligible probability of, because the probability that you could predict beta is 1 over 2 to the beta. Now, what happens in the Fiat-Shamir paradigm? Oh, I can tell you, I know, beta, I can predict it, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I predicted. Beta is going to be eval hash key on this message. That's the idea. Now, to implement this idea, it's harder. It requires some work. I'll tell you why this idea is not trivially implemented. Because when we do Fiat-Shamir, we say, we start with a protocol. And now the question is, does there exist a Fiat-Shamir hash family for which it's secure? Now, we start with a protocol. This protocol can say, okay, alpha is hash key, for example, and then you accept if you originally accepted, or if eval of hash key of alpha, which is also hash key, is equal to beta. Now, this will not happen, but in the Fiat-Shamir, it will happen. I'm going to just send the Fiat-Shamir hash key. That's what I do. Okay, but then someone will say, okay, so you give me a protocol. What is the length of your alpha? It's lambda bits. I'm going to use a hash function that the hash key is longer. And now you can't send it. Because here I'm like, I'll send the hash key. So then you need to use a hash to kind of squish this hash key in. It's more complicated. But the basic idea is this does not work if somehow the verifier accepts you, if you kind of convinced him that you can kind of predict his beta. That's really, and so we can construct kind of contrived protocols that achieve this, or we can construct very contrived hash functions that do this weird game inside the hash function. Like the hash function becomes trivial if you feed it something that kind of, so it requires more work, but it's all very contrived. Okay, so I hope I convinced you with these examples. The counterexamples are so contrived. So when you say, oh, we found the Fiat-Shamir is not secure, and you show this example, the reaction should be, come on. Okay, nobody uses these protocols. But what it does tell us, you can't apply Fiat-Shamir blind. You can't, okay, what it does tell us is for all of us who are obsessed with trying to prove the paradigm, there's no general proof because we have counterexamples. At least that. Question?
Do you need to start with the protocol that's like negligibly sound?
Great question. Okay, that's my next. So yeah. The answer is yes, but I'll talk about that next. The question was about negligible soundness, but we'll get to that next. So, any questions though before? Okay, so but you know, still people use the Fiat-Shamir paradigm, and there's a question of, is it sound? For natural protocols, is it sound? And the answer is, actually, it would have been nice if we can come up with nice protocols and say, at least a large class of protocols, and say, yeah, if you use this hash function, this specific hash function, which we know is collision resistant under discrete log or under some other assumption, then your scheme is sound. That would be very nice. We're still not there yet, but we made a lot of progress in recent years, and I want to tell you about the progress. But before that, the first kind of way we try to analyze. So the Fiat-Shamir gained popularity very quickly, okay? And because it's so simple and so efficient, it became very, very popular. And people really wanted to understand its security. Is it sound? Is it not sound? And then in '93, Bellara and Rogaway introduced kind of an ideal model called the random oracle model. And this model said, you know what? By the way, this was before we had any counterexamples. Okay, this model was introduced by Bellara and Rogaway in, I believe, 93. This was before we knew any counterexamples for the paradigm. And they, I mean, except for some, which goes to your question, Leo, but I'm going to get to it. And they wanted to ask, can we prove security of the Fiat-Shamir? What do we need about the hash function? What properties do we need about the hash function to prove security? And the first property, they said, you know what? What if the hash function was completely random? So when you use Fiat-Shamir, we use a specific, there's a circuit that computes the hash function. It's like a Turing machine. A polynomial time Turing machine, or a polynomial size circuit. Takes a hash key and, okay. They say, you know what if the hash function is completely random? Okay, so the random oracle model says, suppose we apply Fiat-Shamir paradigm with truly random function h. So this is completely random. So what do I mean by completely random? So now, I guess, instead of choosing a function from a family, we don't choose a function, and we just say, suppose they have a truly random, they have access to it, both of them, to a truly random function, and they can ask. So when the prover computes alpha, he has oracle access to this function, and he tells the function, give me the function applied to x and alpha. and he gets back a beta. And every time this hash, this oracle, he gets a query, he chooses a completely random. So think of this as like a database of all, like of size 2 to the lambda, of all, like just random elements. A really, really, truly random function. So now the question was, okay, if this is truly random, now can we get security? At least, like that's the minimum. And moreover, it seemed like the answer should be yes, because in some sense, what was their intuition? The intuition is, what does it matter if you're talking to a verifier that gives you random queries, or you're talking to, in terms of the prover? So the prover is trying to cheat. What does it matter if he's talking to a verifier that gives him kind of random betas, or he's talking to a random function that gives him random betas? Both of them give random betas. What's the difference? So it should at least be secure in the random oracle model. Let's first establish that. So is it secure in the random oracle model? No. And this goes to Leo's question. And I'm going to tell you why it's not secure in the random oracle model. And actually, let me take a little detour and tell you, I'll show why it's not secure in the random oracle model via a little protocol. This protocol actually is going to be useful because actually later we will show that the Fiat-Shamir is sound for this protocol. It's kind of weird, but this protocol, by the way, is a very important protocol. So let me do a little detour. I think it's a really interesting detour, so I hope you enjoy it. It takes us a little bit into the land of cryptography, but not too bad. A little further than we went so far. So far, we just talked about hash functions. Okay, so what I'm going to say now is going to be a little bit of a high level. So a protocol that I want to talk about is actually a zero-knowledge protocol. So, so far, we just talked about verification, succinctness and efficiency. But as I mentioned, interactive protocols were actually invented for the sake of zero knowledge. So what was the goal? The goal was, forget about succinctness now. It was not at all about succinctness. All we wanted is a prover that has, let's say, a witness for there's some language. And let's say the language we're going to be interested for today, just as an example, is the language of Hamiltonian cycle. That's just an example. So this language consists of graphs. So this is the language that consists of all graphs. Graph consists of nodes and edges, such that this graph has a Hamiltonian cycle, such that G has a Hamiltonian cycle. What this means is just, there's a kind of a cycle of all the nodes. So it means that there's a cycle of all the nodes. So let's say you start with node I1, I2, up to IN, and then go up to IN, so that there's an edge here, edge, 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 and edge all the way back. That means that if there's some such a setting of the nodes for which you can kind of set them in a way that there's edges that kind of complete a cycle, then we say the graph has a Hamiltonian cycle. Okay, this language is NP complete. Okay, now going back, what is a zero knowledge proof? A zero knowledge proof is a way I want to convince you that a graph G has a Hamiltonian cycle. Now I can give you the Hamiltonian cycle. I can give you, see, here's the nodes. You can look, there's a cycle there. But I don't want to give you any information. I don't want you to learn anything. I don't want you to find the Hamiltonian cycle. I don't want to reveal any information, but I want to convince you that it has a Hamiltonian cycle. How do I do that? So there's a celebrated result. It started with Kilian-Micali and Rakoff in mid-80s. And where they defined this notion of zero knowledge and constructed some protocols. But later, very shortly later, Goldreich, Micali, and Wigderson showed that actually any NP language has a zero-knowledge proof. Okay, and let me give you one specific zero-knowledge proof for the Hamiltonian cycle language, and this is due to Blanc. Okay, so I'll show you the proof. It's very, very nice. Okay, and it's going to be useful for us to show why the random local model fails, and then also to show the security of the Fiat-Shamir. So this is actually, we'll get back to this protocol. Okay, so what is this protocol? There's a prover and a verifier. The idea is the following. The prover he has a G. The first thing he's going to completely permute the nodes. Okay, so he's going to choose a random permutation pi. Let's say n is the number, denote by n the number of vertices in G. He's going to choose a random permutation of the nodes. Now he has kind of the permuted graph in his head. So he has pi of G in his head. Now this pi of G has a Hamiltonian cycle because G has, and I just renamed the nodes. Now I want to give you just this Hamiltonian cycle. So I'm going to give you the nodes here that form a Hamiltonian. So I want to give you, I would like to give you the nodes that form just the Hamiltonian cycle, but I can't give you, that will reveal information. Okay, so I don't want to do that. Instead, I'm going to give it to you kind of in a safe, okay, hidden. This is what in cryptography we call this commitment scheme. So I'm going to give you a commitment of the cycle C. So think of this, for all the possible edges, I'm with 0, 0, 0, 0. Only in the cycle I'm going to put 1. That's what I mean here. So this is like, think of it's a matrix of n by n. N by n. For any possible edge, for any possible nodes I and j, I'm going to put 0, like there's no edge. Only if it's on the cycle, I'm going to put an edge there. Yeah?
So the cycle is on the label of the commuted, like the permuted graph.
Exactly, on the permuted graph. Okay, and the reason I permute the graph is to ensure zero knowledgeness. Even though when I send the commitment, really think of it, we're going to later talk about how to do this commitment, but for now, think of it, there's a safe. I'm putting my commitment inside the safe. I leave the key to myself and I give you this box. So you learn nothing. Okay? So here really you learn nothing. But you're not convinced either because you just got a safe. What are you going to do with it? So now here's how I'm going to convince you that actually this graph has a Hamiltonian cycle without leaking any information. So you, the verifier, you're going to give me a random bit B. This is going to be random bit. Now, if B is 0, I'm just going to open this. So if B is 0, open. I'm going to open the safe. And now you can see that what's sitting there is a Hamiltonian cycle. Okay, now what did you learn? Well, because I permuted, it's just a random cycle. Actually, it has nothing to do with the graph. I can even first just choose a random cycle, commit to it, and then kind of choose this permutation to align with this cycle. So really, because I chose a random permutation, it's just a random cycle. So you didn't learn anything. It's just a random cycle. You and yourself can put a random cycle in a safe. So really no information. What if B equals 1? If B equals 1, I want to give you pi. Okay, so I give you pi. But now I can't open this. Because now if you know pi and you see the cycle, you know where my Hamiltonian cycle is. So what I'm going to do, I just want to convince you that this cycle only has edges that were in this graph. So I'm going to open only the non-edges. So instead of opening everything, I'm going to open non-edges in the permuted graph. So note, here we have, so I have here like, okay, so there's a question, how do I open? So think of it, I commit to n squared bits, okay? For any possible ij, I have a bit saying, is it 0 or is it 1? Is there an edge or is it not an edge? Think of it as I'm giving you n squared safes, okay? Like now, if b is 0, I open all the safes. I open all the safes, and you see, oh, there's just a cycle. You know, everything is 0 except for, you know, I1 and I2 there's 1, and then I2, I3, that's it. Everything else is 0. If you send me a 1, then I open something else. I don't open everything. The opposite. What I do is I give you pi, and for every non-edge in pi, I open the non-edge safe, and I show you, see, they're 0. So all the safes I opened are just going to be 0. So you really didn't learn anything. I just opened zeros. You can simulate that in your head. What do you learn? In some sense, you know, if you know that if you accept me, I'm going to open to just zeros there. And the pi doesn't reveal anything. It's just a random permutation. So note, you, the verifier, didn't learn anything. If you open to 0, if you send me 0, I just open random cycle, has nothing to do with the graph, nothing, just random cycle. Okay, that's not helpful for you. If you open 1, I gave you completely random permutation. You know pi g on your own, and I open to zeros. All the non-edges, I open to 0. You learn nothing. Still, you are somewhat convinced that this protocol, that the graph is Hamiltonian. Why are you somewhat convinced that there's a Hamiltonian cycle? Why are you somewhat convinced? Because if there is no Hamiltonian cycle in G, I cannot open to both 0 and 1. Why is it the case that I cannot open? Let's see. Let's say the graph is, there's no Hamiltonian cycle. Now, I sent you these n squared safes. Case 1, there's indeed only a Hamiltonian cycle there. Like indeed, when you open all these n safes, what you see is everything is 0 except for a Hamiltonian cycle. If that's not the case, I cannot open to 0. If I open to 0, you catch me. Now, suppose I did succeed in opening to 0. Namely, there's just a Hamiltonian cycle there. That's it. Then I claim there's no way I can open to 1. Why? If there is a Hamiltonian cycle there, I know the Hamiltonian cycle is not on the non-edges, because the non-edges are 0. If I open on 1, the non-edges are 0. So the Hamiltonian cycle is on the edges. But there is no Hamiltonian cycle. It can't be on the edges. So either I'm a cheating prover, either I may be able to open to 0, I may be able to open to 1, but I can't open to both. So with probability half, you'll reject me. Half is not that great, but it's something. Okay, so at least now we know with probability half, I'm going to be rejected. Okay. You like the detour? Okay. Let's go back to the random oracle, but before, yeah.
You don't have to commit the whole graph, not just the cycle.
So what I commit to is actually, I have n squared commitments. Everything is 0 except for a random cycle. I only commit to zeros. Why is it important that I only commit to zeros? Because when I open, okay, I want to make sure that there's a cycle here. But when I open to 1, I don't want to reveal anything. And the way I don't reveal anything is I show that all the non-edges in pi of G, if you open them here, you'll get a 0.
Oh, okay, so it's a matrix, so it kind of has everything, but like it's just with the cycle like outline.
Exactly. what I commit to is a matrix. What I commit to is like a matrix that only has like a Hamiltonian cycle, and that's it. Everything else is 0. Yeah?
So in the second case, the verifier cannot use the permutation to figure out what edges are not in the Hamiltonian cycle for the original graph.
Right, so in the B equals 1 case, you're talking about, yeah, in the B equals 1 case, the verifier, what does he learn? He learns pi, the permutation. That's just a random permutation. And then I'm just telling you, I'm reassuring you that I didn't lie. What do I mean by reassure you? I open, everybody, you can compute pi g on your own. That's not a secret. G is given, pi is given. You can compute pi g. You see all the non-edges. And all the non-edges, I'm going to open only the non-edges and show you zeros. Okay, because the point is, if I was honest, what I should do is put ones only on edges, and not only on edges, only on the Hamiltonian and the edges that form a Hamiltonian cycle. That's what I should do if I'm honest. And what I show you, I don't show you that because that will give information, but at least what I show you, then all the non-edges here, I committed to 0. And that gives you no information. But if indeed the non-edges are 0, and there's a Hamiltonian cycle, then it means the Hamiltonian cycle must be edges. And then it means that pi of g has a Hamiltonian cycle. And that can't be. If g doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle, pi of g doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle. And that's why I can't succeed in convincing you in answering both questions. Yeah?
Is there a formal way to say what it means to be zero knowledge? Like,
yeah, good.
What way to verify
Good. So the question, yeah. Actually, I plan not to go into the definition, but it's so beautiful, so I will. Yeah, so the question was, what is the definition actually of zero knowledge? And the definition of zero knowledge says that, what does it mean you don't learn anything? So the definition says that, so this is the definition of zero knowledge. What it says is, the verifier, actually it says, it's stronger, it says for every verifier, not just the honest verifier, even malicious verifier. You can talk about honest verifier zero knowledge, like the honest verifier who just does what it should do and just listens, doesn't learn anything. But actually there's a stronger notion of malicious. So I say even for a malicious verifier, you want to say what he learned, he could have simulated on his own. So the definition says for every, for every verifier, if you look the transcript of, and for every x in L, for every x, if you look at the transcript between the honest prover and the verifier, the prover has a witness, but the verifier doesn't. What he learned from this transcript, or what the verifier, let me write it differently. Let me say the view of V star while interacting with P on input X. So whatever V star learned, he could have simulated on his own. So it says there exists a simulator, and this is efficient, an efficient simulator, such that the simulator efficiently can generate this transcript on his own. If he has V star. He needs V star because, of course, V star depends what he sends and so on. But he could generate it on his own. Yeah?
Depend on V star more than using it as a black box? Is it the same simulator for everyone, or is it?
Oh my God, there's so many. Okay, there's so many notions of zero knowledge. So, for example, first of all, I'll answer your question. The question was: is the simulator only gets V star as oracle access? Does he get it as an input? Is it universal? Is it there exists a simulator for every V star? Is it for every V star there exists a simulator? Moreover, let me continue. Is V star all powerful? Is V star supposed to be PPT or poly size? And the answer is there's many definitions. But yeah, so originally, all the protocols we had used the verifier as a black box. However, in 2001, I think was it, Boaz Barak was the first to kind of construct non-black box zero knowledge, where the simulator used verifier as a non-black box, and it was a really breakthrough result because what he managed to get is a new zero knowledge proof that we didn't know of before. It was kind of constant round. Now, you can say, wait, this is also constant round. What do you mean we didn't know before? But this is only soundness half. Turns out, if you want negligible soundness, you need to repeat this protocol sequentially. If you repeat it in parallel, it's not necessarily zero knowledge. Actually, yeah, this one actually is not zero knowledge if you repeat it in parallel. We'll talk about that. And so using non-black box technique, he managed to show the first kind of constant round zero knowledge, public coin zero knowledge proof. So there's many variants. Okay, is the point. Okay, but this is kind of a common variant to think about. And also, so this is kind of poly-size, or V can have auxiliary input. So for every X and augs, or V star is poly-size, so we can have like auxiliary information about the X. Even if he has auxiliary information about the X, still, so V star is kind of may have auxiliary information about X, still the two are indistinguishable. Yeah?
What if the prover followed the commitment where he created matrices that ensure that there's the cycle in that matrix that commits to that?
Wait, again, what if the prover commits to a cycle or no?
He commits to a cycle, but the cycle is not necessarily with...
It has nothing to do with G. Just commits to any cycle.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. He commits to a cycle.
Okay.
Send that, and he'll be able to answer us in case it's 0, right?
Yeah, he'll be able to, exactly. He'll be able to answer 0, but he won't be able to answer 1. Because that cycle must touch an edge. Because, that cycle must touch a non-edge. Because if it only touched edges, there is no cycle. So that cycle, you give here pi. Now the cheating prover can give whatever pi he wants. But the point is that the graph, the permuted graph, doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle. Because if G doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle, the permuted G also doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle. So this graph doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle. And that means that the cycle that's here, I don't care how you generate it, whatever the cycle was, it must touch a non-edge. Now, so the Hamiltonian cycle says, there's an edge between I1, I2, there's an edge between I2, I3. One of them cannot be edge here. It can't be that all of them are edges here because because it doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle. So one of them cannot be an edge here. And now what the verifier is asking from the prover, he looks at all the I1 and all the I and J that do not have an edge, and he asks him, open that edge. I want to see that it's 0. I want to see that I gave you n squared safes. So for every I and J, there's a safe. And it should be 1 if there's an edge and 0 otherwise. I mean, if there's an edge in the Hamiltonian cycle and 0 otherwise. Now, what the verifier is asking the prover, for every ij here that does not have an edge, I want you to open the safe corresponding to that edge, and I want to see a 0 there. If there's a 1 there, I'm not happy. I'm going to reject you. Because there should be 1s only on the Hamiltonian cycle. And these are only places that have an edge on your graph. But the problem is, on one of these ij that don't have an edge, you'll see an edge because the Hamiltonian cycle is not all on edges. And then I'm going to catch you. Yeah? Great. Any more questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious. I think there's also a notion called like a proof of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like just not just so it's slightly stronger that requires the prover to actually know the Hamiltonian cycle.
Right.
So here the proof, like with the second part, saying that only guarantees that if this G is not doesn't have a Hamiltonian cycle, then the G prover cannot convince. But doesn't necessarily mean like converse, like is it possible for the G prover to not know the Hamiltonian cycle but still convince the verifier?
Good. No. Good. Great question. So the question was, or let me just answer the question, is the question was, wait, we just proved your soundness, that if X is not the language, on one of the answers you'll fail. But actually, doesn't this protocol give you something stronger? Was the question, and the answer is yes. So what do we mean by something stronger? Let's say G does have a Hamiltonian cycle. Doesn't this protocol tell us not only that G has a Hamiltonian cycle? If you succeed, let's say you succeed probability 1, or with more than half. This protocol tells us not only that G has a Hamiltonian cycle, it means that P must know the cycle. You can actually you can extract the cycle from P. And the answer is yes, you can. You can actually, this is what's called proof of knowledge. It means that P knows. Now I can say, what does it mean that P knows? What do we, this is a theory class mathematics. What does know mean? So what we mean by P knows, what we mean is that we can actually efficiently extract the cycle from P. And how do we extract the cycle? It's actually very easy. We ask him, he committed to something. He knows how to open both, that's the assumption. So first we'll ask him, okay, open only the cycle, and then give me the pi. Once I know the pi and the cycle, I know what pi G, and I can actually find the Hamiltonian cycle. So it's more than just a soundness. It's a proof of knowledge. He must know. I can actually use him to kind of extract the Hamiltonian cycle from him. Any other questions? Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break, and then after the break, I'm going to show you why this protocol is not secure in the random Oracle model. But we'll fix it, don't worry. Okay, let's take a break.